Hi, this is Yvette Francino again, and I'm here with a friend from, I think about 15 years ago we met, Amy Sargent, and she is doing all kinds of exciting things that I think really tie into living life fully and making connections. So I'm going to just hand it over to Amy to tell us all about that.
Hi, Yvette. Thank you so much. And hi, everyone. I love the phrase that Yvette just used, a life worth living. I think it's something all of us look for and want, but never really get a grasp on how to do that. So by all means, don't think I've figured that out, but I definitely am in process and learning techniques along the way, learning new skill sets, learning from others, how to at least be on the path to hopefully get a little bit closer to that. So I'm the executive director at the Institute for Social and Emotional Intelligence. And we teach coaches, leaders, individuals about what emotional intelligence is and why it's relevant. So how familiar are you with emotional intelligence, Yvette?
I am quite familiar with that. I have always had an interest in that, and I don't know if you know what a Scrum Master is, Amy, or I was an Agile coach, or I still do that a little bit on the side, but I always have said emotional intelligence is the number one skill that we want. Agile coaches or Scrum Masters or servant leader kind of coaches,
Yeah.
and really probably any coach. It is the number one skill, and so yes, I'm very familiar with what emotional intelligence is all about.
Sounds like it. Yeah. Yeah. For those of you who maybe haven't heard the phrase or have an idea, we define it as the ability to be aware of your own emotions in the moment, but also being able to tune into other people's emotions in those moments, and then managing our own behaviors accordingly, and not managing that other person, but managing our relationship with them. So it's a lot about self awareness and then self management. So many times in life, we've been taught to tune out our emotions or leave your emotions at the door, or those emotions are not appropriate. I think we all, as kids, were probably told at one point, stop crying. This isn't about that. It's actually about tuning into our emotions, listening to them as kind of like a dear old friend who's willing to speak the truth to us, to tune into those emotions because they're telling us something vital about what's going on, and then using those to manage our behavior. And at the same time, learning to tune into those around us, what they're feeling. Maybe it's not exactly what they're saying, but learning to read in between the lines, becoming a good listener, to tune into their emotions, and then manage our relationship with that person effectively. And I'm finding that a grasp of this is so key to that life worth living that we're talking about. Self-awareness is huge, and it's so hard to grow and make changes in any direction if we're not first aware where we're at. And putting a why to those feelings is really important. You know, I might be aware that right now I'm angry. And being able to connect to why I'm angry. Is it from a conversation I just had? Is it for something I just heard on the news? Being able to make that connection to the why behind our emotions so helps with self awareness. And then now that I'm tuned into how I'm feeling, I can manage my next steps. So, really a lot about choice instead of letting our circumstances dictate how we're feeling and how we behave, tuning into the emotions that we feel as a result of circumstances sometimes, and then choosing how we want life to play out from there. So for me, it's been very empowering to learn about emotional intelligence because I feel like I have a choice that no matter how terrible things may get around me, no matter how scary, how fearful, how discouraging, how depressing events around me can be, that I still have a choice to choose how I want to live. That's been like a breakthrough for me. I think in my times past, I've tended to be one that kind of is a finger pointer, blaming other people, blaming circumstances, kind of playing that victim role. You know, oh poor me, I can't help it because look what's happening. So it's been really empowering to stumble upon this emotional awareness piece to realize I do have a choice, and no matter what's going on, I can tune into my feelings and make decisions about the life I want to live, even despite circumstances at times. Does that resonate with you or make sense?
Absolutely. The only part that I would say doesn't resonate is when you said you were a pointer or played the victim, because I have never gotten that impression of you from the 15 years I've known you. You're always a positive, uh, you always have positive messages and you see the silver lining. So that kind of gets me to my question, though. Next is about how much, if, a natural personality that people have, because I know, for example, my family is very what's called left-brained. We're very logical people. So we're not
Yep.
nearly as emotional as, um, especially as a woman, what a typical woman is known to be
Yeah.
emotional.
Yeah.
And yet I still feel pretty tuned into emotional intelligence. So
Hmm.
my feeling is that you can learn the skills wherever you fall on the personality scale. But have you found that in your practice? Do you find that people are somewhat influenced by what their personality is and how well they're able to gain these skills?
Yes, yes, and yes, I think are my answers to those questions. I agree with you. I do feel emotional intelligence is possible for anyone. There may be a few emotional disorders that may make it difficult, and maybe in some cases, an inability to exhibit a competency, for example, of empathy. There are some emotional disorders that seem, at least research what it shows now, to prevent empathy to be able to be felt. But for the most part, people, and I'll say in a normal or in a healthy emotional state, do have the ability to develop emotional intelligence. What I find that personality definitely can have an influence. And I'll just give an example. I'm actually a bit of an introvert. I love my alone time. I fill up when I'm alone. I get a little stressed and worn out when I'm in large groups of people for a long time. And for that, so because of that introversion is there, say I'll just use a competency of emotional intelligence, such as effective communication. Because of my introversion, I hit limits on how well I can tune into others. So say I'm at a party, I've hit my limit, I need to go home. My ability to communicate well at that point will go down significantly. And I really feel that that's a personality trait that's driving that behavior. Now, can I still keep smiling and still keep asking the questions and be a good listener? Sure. But it's a stretch and I really have to push myself. So I hope that gives an example. I feel like personality really does, it can influence, and certain competencies of emotional intelligence may be a little more difficult or maybe take a little longer or a little more practice to get there than
Mhm.
others, but still feel it's completely it's a completely place we can all reach. Does that
Yeah,
answer?
it does answer it. And it's hard to ever know, other than my own personality, how it must feel for someone with a very emotional personality. I would think it's almost easier, again, for us left-brained people
Mm,
to be able to kind of step out and recognize our different emotions, because I think that it does seem more natural, maybe for me as a logical person. Again, that's
mhm.
sort of what makes me more logical than
Yeah.
emotional. Is it's not like an, you know, instant where I react to something. I kind of keep those emotions inside
Yep.
normally. And so I think, again, on one hand, I thought maybe emotional intelligence would be harder for someone who's sort of low on the emotion scale. But now, as
Mhm.
we're talking about it, I'm wondering if it may be more difficult for somebody who is naturally more emotional, because
Mm.
they have a harder time maybe in getting more into their head about
Yeah.
thinking
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
I have this emotion now. And so instead of the reaction, I'm going to kind of step back and think about, I'm angry.
Yeah.
Why am I angry? And
Yeah. Yeah.
so,
Yeah,
but
I definitely think it's going to vary from person to person. And I would love to jump to conclusions and say, well, people who are this way,
yeah,
it's going to be, but unfortunately, we don't get it off. We don't get off that easy.
yeah.
When you describe someone who's emotional, what I hear you saying is, I've recently learned about something that goes on in our brain, and it's part of the study of neuroscience, the ability that our brain can actually change. These things we call amygdala hijacks. And I think we in the past have referred to those as highly emotional people. You know, the girl you see over there crying at work, and
Mm.
I'm just using
Yeah.
stereotypes.
Mm.
The guy who loses his temper and he's screaming at everyone in the office. These emotional people.
Yeah.
What I've learned that what's really going on is that, you know, they receive stimuli, and we all have these amygdala hijacks. We receive stimuli into our brain, and the amygdala is that part of the brain that receives that stimuli and decides if we need to fight,
Mhm.
flight, or freeze. And it's a natural like protection thing
Mhm.
in our brain that keeps us safe. The problem is so many of the stimuli that our amygdala perceives as danger is just that it's perceived danger. It's not real danger. So when someone's yelling at me, not necessarily danger there that I need to fight, flight, or freeze. If I would just give my brain a little time to process that, let it get to the cortex where I can reason it, you know, reason through it, then I'll know not to shoot that text back. You know, the text we send that later we think, why did I write that? Or, you know, say something back that later you think, oh, I wish I would have just kept my mouth shut. So learning to allow our brain to properly process these emotions. I think when we think about emotional people, it's not so much that they're feeling more emotions, but maybe aren't allowing those emotions to reach that reasonable part of their brain, the cortex, to make a choice from there. So when you see someone kind of freaking out, you know, we use that phrase, they're freaking out. They're having an amygdala hijack. That amygdala is getting flooded with emotions, and they act in that moment. And that's where we say the things we wish we wouldn't have said later. And it's also when we don't say the things we wish we would have said. How many of us have laid in bed at night and thinking back on maybe a conversation that didn't go well, thinking, oh, I wish, you know, it comes to you like, oh, I wish I would have said this, you know, but we
Yeah.
didn't.
Yeah.
So learning to let that stimuli, and we have stimuli all day long, and these stimuli trigger emotions in us. Allowing it to go through that amygdala to say, do I need to fight here? No.
Mhm.
Do I need to flight? Do I need to run away? No. Do I need to freeze? It's, you know, it's really not a danger. Someone's just saying something I don't like. Someone just posted something on social media that I don't agree with. Do I need to fight, flight, or freeze? If we don't let that stimuli get through the amygdala and off to the cortex, that's when we act so poorly. Does
Well,
that make
yeah,
sense?
yeah, absolutely. And is that part of what you teach as emotional intelligence is to kind of, do that
Yeah, yeah,
immediate,
oh,
so
yeah.
that it becomes almost natural.
Yeah, and it's like any muscle, you know, if I'm not a runner and I want to go run a marathon 26 miles, I'll probably get about a half mile and start to feel like I'm dying. I can't just go out and run a marathon. And it's like we have emotional muscles that need to be developed as
Yeah.
well. And it takes practice. And I wish there was like a magic, you know, rub the little bottle and the genie comes out, and it takes hard work, and it takes repeated efforts of new behavior to start building different habits. So part of what we teach, there's 4 quadrants of emotional intelligence. You have that self-awareness piece, and then you have self-management, and then other awareness, and then relationship management. And your question, I think, is asking to that the self-management piece, allowing emotions to get through the amygdala and then off to the cortex would be a practice in self-management. And we teach our coaches tools that they can help clients with. Tools, practices, think of them as exercises, going on a run. And I don't mean literally going on a run, but emotional exercises that we can begin to do to kind of rewire the way our brain is processing those emotions.
Yeah, very interesting. Another thing, and I don't know if this is part of emotional intelligence, but this is part of what we were teaching as agile coaches to people was about something called an emotional wake. I don't know if that's something that you've heard of, that what kind of emotion you leave the person with. So a
Yeah,
wake, like as in when you're water skiing, there's a wake there, but that,
yeah.
they talked about always trying to leave even difficult conversations with a positive emotional wake that
Mm,
you
I love
um
that.
yeah, because it is that's why it becomes so contagious. Whatever your mood is that kind of feeling you leave another person with. And so often
Mm,
when we're not aware of our emotions, if we're stewing about some problem and we're giving off this energy, this negative energy, then other people might take it personally
Yeah.
and think that
Yeah.
that it's about them. And so we talk about being really aware of the emotional wake you're leaving when you're with somebody else.
I
So
love that phrase. I'm not familiar with it, but I am now, so thank you. And
yeah,
I think that speaks to that other awareness piece, that third quadrant, and then managing that relationship would be that as well. I'm aware that maybe I've left this on a negative note, or I've put a bad taste in their mouth. How can I better manage this relationship to set it on a positive note?
yeah, yeah,
And you touched on I think my heart's passion right now is the science of positive psychology,
yeah,
and
absolutely.
all the absolutely amazing positive results we can have when we learn to focus more on the positive, not pretend the bad's not happening, not like a Pollyannish approach where everything's great, when it's not, but learning again, letting stimuli come in and processing it in a way that produces positive emotions. And again, to learn that it's something we have a choice on, no matter how bad things are around me. I still can choose to do things that produce positive emotions. And when we have those positive emotions going on, possibilities open up. If you've ever caught yourself in a really bad mood, and I get to these places where it feels like everything's closing down, and it's like tunnel vision. You can only focus on this one thing that's not going right. And the more I think about it, the crankier I get and the more negative I get. There's not a lot of options to me in those moments. I don't see possibilities. I lose things like hope. I lose things like gratitude. And it can really narrow the path. It's some of us, if we don't catch it, to the point of becoming quite dysfunctional. So
Hmm.
on the other hand, learning that we actually have a choice there, that when we start to feel negative emotions that could take us down, to pause and to choose a different path and to choose to do things that actually bring about positive emotions. There's so much research on that right now. It's an exciting area, and for me, again, it's something I've started to put into practice, even when I don't feel like it, and has been such a significant part of living a life worth living,
Yeah,
living a life
absolutely.
that's the kind of life we kind of dream of.
Yeah, and so we'll segue into sort of my final question because that I know you are doing some big things and living out dreams, and I usually end these interviews asking people a question about. I've phrased it in different ways, but what a meaningful life means to you. I
Mm,
know you are already doing. Sometimes they say if you only had a year left to live, how would you spend it?
mm,
And it,
yeah.
I know right now we're living in weird times with COVID, but I just want to hear from you what a meaningful life looks like, and again, some of your a little bit about your adventure that you're taking now.
Mm, yeah, thanks for asking that. A few years back, I had a close friend of mine that struggled through cancer and passed away. And in her last months, she was bedbound. So, and she had her bed set up by a window, and she said she would look out that window and she would think of all the things she didn't get to do. And because she was waiting until she had that next job, or waiting till her kids were grown, or waiting till she was retired. There were all these, someday I'm going to do these things. And it really hit me to the core that we can't wait on the thing on living the life we want to live. We really don't know what tomorrow promises, and because of that, we need to start now. So I made a choice at that time to, first of all, recognize what my dreams are. What are the components of a life worth living to me? One of the things that helped me with that, the VIA character strengths, you and I have talked about that before. It's a assessment you can take online, produced by the VIA Institute, to understand what your signature strengths are. What are the things that make up the core of who you are? And their thought is, as you do those things, you're going to produce positive emotions, which help you live out the life you want. So, one of my top signature strengths is an appreciation of excellence and beauty. And I realized I wasn't living in a situation where I had to work hard to get out to see beauty. So one of my choices was to move south, because I do happen to love the beach and turquoise waters and sunshine, and move to a beach setting, made it happen. Didn't wait till I had had enough money, was retired. Decided to move to a setting where every day, with very little effort, I could see beauty, be surrounded by what I consider beauty, which I am an absolute fan of: white sandy beaches and sunshine and blue waters. So literally a physical move. I moved into an RV to make that happen. In my dream world, it would have been living in a huge, big, gorgeous beach home on the beach, but had to scale it back down to reality. Moved into an RV, sold all my stuff. I'm trying to free myself up a little bit of the burdens of owning a lot of things, and freeing myself up to be able to experience more experiences. So I'm in process. I don't have it figured out, but I sure am receiving a lot of positive emotions these days, because this lifestyle choice has made it very easy to be surrounded by beauty and excellence and experience it often. So I'm on my way. It's a first step, and I'm really excited to see how it plays out from here. See how long that this actually does fulfill those dreams within. And at some point, probably will need to make some shifts in a new direction. But having an open mind to kind of seeing what the day is going to play out. It's a new way of looking at life for me, and so far so good. Check
Yeah.
back with me in a few weeks, months, and we'll see how it's going.
Well, I have all kinds of things I want to talk to you more about. We'll end this today, but like I was telling you beforehand, I've got to have you back because I'm doing the snowbird thing. I'm heading out to Florida in a couple of weeks, and
Right.
I also love the idea of a beach house. So I'm going to do retreats and things like that. We'll just have to
Yeah.
get together and have a big coaching retreat or something like that.
Sounds
But
good. Yeah, definitely.
anyway, thank you so much, Amy, for being my guest here today. And Carpe Diem.
Thank you. Yep. Thanks so much.
Let's